Growing up, I lived in a decent-sized middle-class apartment complex. This took place around 1988 to 1990, and I was around 4 or 5 when it happened. Since there was only one driveway in and out of the complex, my mother pretty much let me roam around by myself from a very young age. My court, or block of apartments, was the first one you passed entering the complex, and my apartment was about 100 feet from it. I wasn't supposed to leave the court, unless my mom knew whose place I was going to. I was a very curious and precocious child, and very social. My mom called me the mayor because I knew who a good number of people in the complex were. I had overall had a few run-ins with a few creeps, weirdos, and a definite pedo or two over the years living there, but nothing that ever escalated into any sort of worrisome incident. My parents were both pretty tough growing up, and educated me early on street smarts and self-defense. They taught me it was okay to talk to strangers in certain situations, because not everyone is bad, and how to tell when someone might be a danger. We had at one point a particularly ugly and creepy ice cream man. He had a Billy Ray Cyrus type spiky mullet. He always wore tank tops and had really bad acne. He also had really weird teeth. At the time, I considered him to be in his 40s, but looking back on it, he was probably in his late teens or early 20s. He loved talking to the other kids about wrestling. I went to his truck once, along with friends, when he was parked outside the pool. I didn't really have enough money to buy anything, but he gave it to me anyway for whatever money I did have. I didn't like the way he too friendly smiled at me. So if I heard the ice cream man, I'd peek out the window to see which ice cream guy was pulling into the complex, and if it wasn't him, I'd go get some ice cream. I don't know how much time had passed between my first encounter with him and the last, but in between there were a few occasions where I was coming home, or going to a different court for whatever reason, and if I happened to be walking down the main drive, he'd pull up next to me on the sidewalk. I'd try to pretend he wasn't there and cut through the court and hide. He'd holler things like, "Why are you so scared of me? I'm nice. You make me feel bad." One day my mom said I couldn't leave the court for whatever reason. My friend lived in the corner apartment of the court after mine, so I sat on my court's corner nearest to hers. She sat on her corner. We were talking and tossing toys to each other across the parking lot. I heard the ice cream man. Even though I was at the other end of my block, he saw me when he pulled in. He started to drive towards me, and I just ran and hid in my court until he moved further into the complex. I waited what felt like enough time and didn't hear the music anymore. As I walked back to the corner, I found that my friend had gone inside already. I picked up whatever toy I had left behind, and as I turned to start walking home, I noticed he's sitting in the parking lot of the court across the main drive, in his truck with the music off. I drop what I was holding and go to pick it back up. He's directly across the street from me, stopped. "Hi, what's your name? Can we be friends? I feel bad I scared you. I'm a really nice guy." He had a tie-dye tank top, and his hair was really greasy. I remember being so weirded out by him. My legs locked up because I was so scared, and mentally I was trying to decide if I'd have a better chance escaping through the woods or chancing it down the main drive. "I can't have any friends. My mom said so." "Well, let me give you a free ice cream. I feel bad." "My mom says I can't have ice cream." "Okay, well, you can have candy, or soda, or a snap bracelet." "Sorry, I can't cross the street." "That's okay. I'll come to you. You can ride in the truck and play the music if you want." I realized this back and forth was going to be a losing battle for me, so I decided the best thing to do was play along. "Okay, if you turn the truck around, I don't have to cross the street so my mom won't get mad." He'd have to leave and immediately re-enter the complex to do that, but it would buy me a good 20 or 30 seconds. He got way too excited that I seemed willing, and started to drive. I took off running. I got home and my mom was on the phone with my dad, who was out of state for the day. I told her what had happened and she made me tell my dad. They both told me how proud of me they were and how I had made really grown-up decisions. After that, unless I was out of town, I avoided ice cream men at all costs. I still think about that to this day, and always tell that story to kids I babysit. I just hope I was the only kid he tried to bait, and that no one else had an experience with him which was worse. I recently found this sub, and decided on posting a story that I usually repress. Every so often it comes flooding back to my memory. In the 8th grade I had a stalker, one that I never saw, and one that never said anything in malice towards me. Back in the 8th grade, probably halfway through the school year, I received a phone call from an unknown caller. Usually I wouldn't answer for a number I didn't recognize, or sometimes I would do so in an accent, but I would always hang up after a second or two. Things changed, however, when the second I answered I heard a man say my full name in a questioning tone, like as if he was asking for confirmation that it was me. Being just a kid and thinking this was one of my parents' friends or someone who I could talk to, I told him that it was. Big mistake, but I didn't know at the time. The first phone call I don't remember much of, except that he hung up not long after I said that it was me. Some time passed, maybe less than a week, when I got an unknown call again. I didn't answer, and then I kept getting spam calls, so I finally answered, and this guy was asking me about what shows I like to watch. I got the idea that maybe I shouldn't be talking to this guy, so I hung up right away. Not too much later until another couple of calls came, and I had to tell him to stop calling me. He responded with something to the effect of, "Hanging up mid-conversation is rude." My dad heard me on the phone and asked who I was talking to, so I told him that I didn't know and handed it to him. My dad asked who it was, and told them to stop calling my number in his angry dad tone. He got a confused face for a second, before getting really angry and shouting at them before they abruptly hung up. My father later told me that this person had known his name, and had told him, "Don't be so angry, Carlos," before hanging up. Pretty soon these calls would happen at least once a day, and I would almost always hand the phone to my dad for him to yell at the guy. We told all our friends and family to stop if they were prank calling me, and we tried to get the police involved. We also contacted my middle school, saying that there was an adult being creepy with me. The guy never called during school hours, and would usually call at first when I was home alone. Soon he switched it up to calling around the time my father would get home from work. The guy sounded young. For a long time we thought maybe my uncles or their friends were playing pranks on us. He sounded to be maybe in his mid to late 20s, and sort of sounded Latino. He never had an angry tone and never said anything explicitly malicious, but he was a stalker. He knew the names of my parents, my sister, my dogs, some of my cousins, and even my grandparents. He never called when we had company over, and it was never after 8 p.m. At one point I was sitting in my room and got a call. By this point I was nearing the last few weeks of school, and because this guy had never really said anything bad, the police had said there was nothing they could do. I just answered the phone and asked what he wanted. I remember it clear as day. He was listing off video games. Red Dead Redemption, Modern Warfare 2, Halo 3. I looked at my disc stand and saw that he was reading off the list in the order that my games were from top to bottom. I stood up and looked out the window, but I couldn't see anyone there. After the list was done, I just stood there, and he told me something about me having good taste in games, and that we should play together sometime. At this moment I was scared shitless. I cried and called my dad. He came early, and we realized, like idiots, that we could just change my number. We changed my number finally, and I purged my Facebook account, and we all set our accounts to private. Maybe 6 months later, we moved, and after changing the number, I never got any more calls from this guy. The reason I came to tell this story is because I've been getting unknown numbers calling me for the past couple of days. I never answer them anymore, but telling my girlfriend about it, she reminded me about that guy. So I guess I'll be changing my number soon as a precaution. I have a few more stories that I'll give you now, as I'll be busy for a bit. It was one of the last couple of calls, on a night where we were driving through my great-grandma's house to visit her, because she only lives with her brother and she gets lonely. At this time, due to the Stalker, we didn't really post where we were online, or where we were going, or what we were doing until we already got home, and unless we were meeting with a group, we didn't text or call them about it. Just some precautions we would take. So we go over to have dinner and things are going pretty great. I remember getting the call and I ignored it, and the second time I just handed my dad the phone. My dad went outside of the house to talk to the guy, and while I don't know the details of the conversation, it was a pretty long one. Maybe 10 plus minutes, probably the longest call we ever had with the guy. My dad came inside and looked upset, probably because he felt he was powerless. We all did. These were very upsetting times, but we didn't want to scare my great-grandma, so we just continued the conversation and eating the dinner, and stayed for a bit until it was time to head home. The guy called on our way back home, calling my dad by his name, and my parents pleaded with him to at least give them a name or something. My phone was on speaker, so I remember this conversation. The guy was just trying to ask how my day was, and I told him to shut up and that I didn't want to talk to him. The call drops because we were driving through a hill area with bad connection. A couple of minutes later, he called again, and a few calls until we answered. As always, he seemed mildly flustered but not necessarily angry when we would hang up, and he would tell us how rude it was to hang up mid-conversation. My dad had me hang up and told me to turn my phone off, so I did. Later when we got home, I got one call, and I walked into my parents' room and answered it, putting on speaker and throwing it on the bed. The guy asked something akin to, "Why was your phone off today, buddy?" My dad said to leave us alone and that we were tired of this. The guy said that we probably lost connection through the hill, so he forgave us. My mom asked him what hill he was talking about, and he replied, "The one to lead us." That's the name of my great-grandma. Best we can make up, him knowing that is because my parents posted photos of us hanging out there when we got home, and he was lurking on our profiles. But how he knew about the hill is beyond us. I work at a retail store, and I detest my job with all my heart. Because I was a dumb shit and said I'm always available, they routinely fuck me over and put me at nights. I whine, bitch, and moan, and digress. I'm okay working nights since I get to see my boyfriend when he picks me up. He usually gets off at 10:30, but he doesn't leave until 11, so most nights I'd have to wait for him. On top of that, he has to make a 10-minute drive, so I'd have to wait an hour and 40 to 45 minutes, which didn't bother me much. He'd call to tell me he was coming and make sure I was still alive. Earlier in the week, an Uber driver kept asking me if I was someone named Lenore. I told him no, and he did it again, but this time he kept asking if I was sure. How the fuck am I not going to be sure of my name? Fortunately, my boyfriend pulled in and honked at me, causing the Uber creep to speed away. I'm a paranoid penny, so this made me wonder if he'd been watching me, and knew my boyfriend always came late. And then I tweaked out since I keep getting these weird phone calls from some telemarketing agency, but when I answer, nobody's there and they hang up. Fast forward to 3 days later, and I'm standing there listening to some music, waiting for him to come pick me up. He finally does, and starts cracking a joke about how he's glad creepy Uber didn't answer. As we start shooting the shit and joking, this Indian woman comes up. I don't hear her at first since I have noise-canceling headphones. She gets closer and keeps calling to me. Finally, she just yells, "Hey!" I look over at her and smile, then go back to talking to my boyfriend. She does it again and I excuse myself for a moment. Hi, can I help you? Do you need a ride? She asks. She looks nice enough, but something just isn't settling right with me. Her car is parked at the stop sign, and there's someone else in it already. No, my friend is coming for me, thank you. I notice there's a man in the driver's seat, and that she isn't wearing a uniform from either of the stores near us. She begins to ask again. Are you sure? I can give you a ride. Do you need one? Get in. Do you need a ride? I begin to feel a little uncomfortable, and my preschool don't get in a stranger's car training kicks in, so I politely decline and go back to talking to my boyfriend. So, are you close? Just pulled out. I'll get there. Just stay on the line. Is that woman gone? No, she wasn't gone. In fact, she was standing 6 feet away watching me, and she looked annoyed. I told him in code that no, she had not left. She had remained there, leaning on the car, just watching me. She was looking angrier and angrier with each passing second. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the man tell her something, and she looks at me and begins interrogating me. Your friend's not here. Do you need a ride? Where's your friend? He probably forgot about you, but that's okay. We'll give you a ride. It's cold. Get in. Tell us where you live. We'll drop you off. At this point, she begins to get closer to me. I try to avoid her by moving to the farther end of the plaza strip. Honey? Yeah, so about my sister. Well, she's gotten closer, but I'm pretty scared she's too far away from home. Something might happen. Hurry so I can tell you. I say this in code as the car drives up, and now she looks pissed. Get in the car now. We'll give you a ride. At this point, she opens the car and begins trying to get me inside, pulling me, yanking on my jacket. She's a taller and bigger woman, so she tries to pick me up. At this point, I'm screaming and kicking and trying to wiggle. Meanwhile, I can hear him yelling at me that he's coming and that he's calling the police. Now my mind is running 1,000 miles an hour, and I'm panicking, thinking I'm going to get raped or some weird present for her husband, since he looks content with her effort to kidnap me. Get in and shut up. I'll hit you. You need to ride with us. Be quiet. You're coming with us and you'll get to see our house. It's very nice. I start crying as she manages to get my torso in the car. My right hand is locked on my phone, and she begins trying to take it. My boyfriend is panicking, telling me the police are sending an officer. She shoves my face into her leather seat, and now my airway is obstructed and she's not letting me go. She's bigger than me, stronger than me, and she knows it. Her whole weight is on top of me. I'm trying not to panic so that I don't black out from lack of oxygen, and all of a sudden I start getting mad as fuck. Her husband says something in Punjabi, and she lifts one hand up and leans down trying to get something from the front. I immediately use the arms I've been using to push myself off the seat to stab her in the stomach. She recoils, letting go of me a little, and I headbutt her, tossing my melon back as I scream, fear-stricken and adrenaline-hazed. That's my purse! I don't know you! Finally, my boyfriend pulls in. I bolt to his car as the Indian woman is sitting on the ground. After I shut the door, he speeds off towards his house. When we get inside, I break down, babbling about how scared and terrifying it all was, and how if I hadn't had that opportunity, she might have taken me to her house and done God knows what. After this incident, the police officer they dispatched got there 20 minutes after, and didn't find anyone. My boyfriend talked to his boss, and was granted the ability to leave early for me. I still get weirded out by cars stalling in the plaza. I was also a little upset that my war cry was a line from King of the Hill. So 2 nights ago, my mom received a phone call from an unrestricted number, talking about some messed up stuff and called me to come get her. I'll lay out everything that happened. At 3:38 a.m., I got a text from my mom asking if I was up still. I told her yes, and was curious as to what she was wanting since it was a work night, and she's always in bed early. My father's a firefighter, and it was a night he was on shift, so I knew he wasn't home. Less than a minute after I replied, she called me, so I answered it. She was very upset, crying actually, and was asking me to come pick her up from home since I live only 2 streets away. It takes me at most 2 minutes to drive to her house. I immediately say yes, throw in my little Bluetooth speaker thing I have and start getting dressed. I grab one of my pistols and proceed out my door. I grabbed my pistol because I was unsure what was going on, and since I have my concealed carry license, it's not uncommon for me to carry. As I'm rushing to get ready, I'm asking her what's wrong. She tells me that at about 3:28, she got a phone call from a restricted number and answered her phone since it woke her up. Upon answering it, she said some guy started talking who she didn't recognize. She's unclear what he initially started saying when she picked up since she was still out of it from just waking up, but went alert when the man said that he was babysitting a 9-year-old girl named Ashley. He told her that earlier when she was on the couch with him, he did stuff to her, basically saying and describing how he molested her. Obviously, my mom is completely blindsided by what's going on and immediately starts asking who she's speaking to, asking if this is some kind of sick prank call, and says to not call her ever again. Immediately, the restricted number calls back and is trying to talk to her again, and again she states this better not be some sick prank and hangs up. He calls a 3rd time and is saying stuff again, though my mom wasn't too sure what he was saying since at this point she was very uncomfortable. She headed to the kitchen to turn on all the house lights and grab one of her knives. Again, she hung up. The number calls a 4th time, and my mom tells him, "Listen up, I'm done playing your games. I'm going to call the cops. Who is this?" At this point, he angrily replies, "No, you listen up. I'm not here to answer your questions. You're here to listen to me. Now you're going to stay on the line and listen to everything I did to this girl. Otherwise, I'm going to go back into her room and make you listen to me do it again." My mom hangs up, and that's when she texts and calls me and stays on the line with me as I'm quickly getting ready and heading over there. While on the line, the man calls a 5th time. My mom ignores the call, but she says that this time he left a voicemail. While on the way there, which again I live a 2-minute drive away, he calls a 6th and 7th time, which my mom ignores. That's when I pull up to the side of her home. I'm not sure if this is a weird coincidence, but as I'm about 2 or 3 houses down from hers about to pull up, that's when the calls stop coming. That being said, I was still around the corner. She jumps into my car and we drive to the police station. I'm also a firefighter for my city, so I knew a cop working, and I knew that I'd rather bring this all up to him as opposed to just calling 911. We get there and explain everything to him, and my mom tells him about the voicemail. She says she doesn't want to listen to it, and asks the cop if he can and maybe get a sense of what my mom is talking about. The cop listens to it for a moment, says it's about 15 seconds long, and then turns and says, "Yeah, you really don't want to listen to that." Anyways, I ask if it's possible to trace a restricted number, since I thought you could, but he said he doesn't think he can. He goes back and gets his supervising officer to get his input on what could be done. The supervisor confirms that a restricted call can't be traced, and says that unfortunately there's not really anything that can be done. He asked my mom if she recognized the man's voice, knew a little girl named Ashley, or heard any sounds of a little girl crying or struggling on the phone. My mom told him that she couldn't make it out. Therefore, there wasn't really any way or reason to get a detective involved. He also suggested that there's a strong possibility that this was just some guy fabricating this whole story, because that's how this weirdo gets off. Just kind of crazy that out of any random number this dude could call, it happened to be my mom's. The officer said the best case scenario was that my mom's cell phone provider could trace the call, but assured us that they probably wouldn't give us the info unless we had orders from a judge. We filed our report, and I brought my mom home and waited till my dad got off work in the morning. Has anyone ever heard of something like this happening before? Should I try to get a hold of the phone company and see if I can get any info at all? I'm sure it would put my mom at ease if the number is from a few states over as opposed to a local one. I don't know though. It just seems weird to try and brush this whole thing off and hope they never call my mom again. The way I see it, if someone makes a bomb threat to a school, which is usually always some kind of kid or someone not being serious at all, and it's treated as if it's true and becomes a huge ordeal, why not treat a phone call of a little girl being molested not in the same category? Should I pursue getting info or not? What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I also wanted to give you guys an extra special thanks because we finally, after a year of hard work, have reached the 100,000 subscriber milestone, which is super awesome. I couldn't have done it without you guys. Some of you have been here since the very beginning, and it's been such a crazy ride going from, oh, my first 100 views to now 100,000 subscribers. It's almost impossible to imagine, but thank you guys so much. I've decided that for my 100,000 subscriber special, I'm probably going to do a longer video, and I might also do a compilation of some of my favorite stories that I've read in my year here on YouTube, or maybe some of my favorite stories that I haven't read for the channel yet. Who knows? Let me guys know what you think about that. As well, probably either tomorrow or the day after, I will have my Christmas video out. Sorry that's a bit late, but I couldn't actually work on the video very much last week, so that's going to be coming out soon here. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, as well as perhaps like, share, or subscribe